So, because if you look at like a high school kid, let's just say you're the best kid, you're the best kid in the state of Arizona, for example. I'll use the example, Cam Caminetti. He's going to be a first rounder this year out of high school here in Arizona. He throws 94 to 97 from the left side. He could throw 88 to 91 and he's probably still going to dominate. But 88 to 91 compared to his mid 90s is a huge drop off. And that would be a red flag for me as a coach. But if you're not ever radaring your guys, you're not ever tracking these things, it can be tough. And you can let those things slip through the cracks, because if you're the best player on the team, even at your B or C game, you're probably still going to be good enough to perform well. So it can be blinding in a way to just go off of performance at the lower levels when a player is just clearly above everybody else. All right, guys, we are live. Today, we are going to dive into injuries. This is obviously something that has been going on a lot this year in the major league, specifically early on in the year. And, truth be told, I think it's become a more popular topic because of the types of players that were getting hurt, like Spencer Strider, Garrett Cole, really big household names. So it kind of alerts you a little bit more when injuries are happening. But with that said, me and Josh both have experiences with injuries that we've been able to overcome and work through. So we thought this would be a valuable episode just to walk through some of those things, and from every aspect, just the rehab journey, the mental side of it, overcoming it, and many things, along with a couple stories. So Josh, I'm going to kick it straight to you, and let's just jump right into it. You've made it known that you have had some back issues in the past. Walk us through that journey a little bit about when it first started, and wherever the story takes you, lead us down that path.
Yeah, for sure. So it started in 2021. I started getting some like nerve pain in my left leg. And it was just kind of like pain running down my leg. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I always thought it was more of a hamstring issue. So I was telling the trainers like, hey, like, I think my hamstring is kind of like sore. It's not feeling too good. And then they keep working on it. They were doing soft tissue and stuff like that, but it wouldn't get better. And then a couple months go by and I was doing a back squat. And back then I loved the powerlifting style lifting. So like heavy deadlifts, heavy back squatting. And I could back squat a lot. So I think at that time I was squatting like 405. I was going for like a heavy set of 5, something like that. And then I go down and I just feel something just like, I want to say pop, but it kind of just like started burning. And I come up and I'm like, oh my God, that didn't feel right. And then right after that, I couldn't bend over. I was like trying to bend over, but my back was like it was like a wooden plank, and like it just wouldn't want to go over. So I was like, oh my God, that's not good. I told the trainers, they're like, yeah, just take a day. What happened that night was it started getting really bad. Like the pain was excruciating, and any type of pressure on that leg would just be like the most excruciating pain ever. And so the trainers were there trying to help me. They're like poking me with acupuncture needles and stuff, trying to like do something, but nothing really helped. And I was just like, I'm in so much pain. So they were like, all right, we're gonna have to call an ambulance. And so it was like midnight, and then we call an ambulance. They come, and I go to the hospital. And what they told me was that, yeah, you have it's probably a herniated disc. We can't really do much about it. You're just going to have to get like an MRI and go from there. And so they pretty much just kicked me out. I was still in so much pain, and I was waiting for my trainers, and I was like just lying on the floor while I was waiting for my trainer. And everyone was like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, but they said they can't do anything. So yeah, I was just lying on the floor, and then we get back, get an MRI, and it was just a fully herniated disc. So the disc was just like poking way out and just all around my nerve. And the doctor said, yeah, you're going to need surgery. So yeah, that's what I did. I flew into Dallas and then got that surgery done. And yeah, after that, the pain went straight away. But that was like 2-month process. So I was bedbound for about 2 months prior to getting that surgery.
Real quick, everyone, I wanted to let you know about my new course called Pitch Design U. It's set to launch on June 10th. I'm going to be covering the fundamentals of pitch movement, how to throw every single pitch type, as well as knowing which one is right for you, and the analytics behind all pitch types, how, when, and where to use your arsenal. I have a wait list right now where I'm sending weekly insights on details about the course. If you're interested, check out the link in the show notes. All right, back to the show. Yeah, how did it feel? So how old were you? You were what, 19, 20?
Yeah, I was 20.
Yeah, I mean, what did it feel like to have a back surgery at 20 years old? Obviously it's not the most common thing for, people your age to have done. Athletes, maybe it's a little more common, but obviously still very rare. I'm curious, with arm injuries, sometimes there can be a mental hurdle to overcome just with trusting it that you can actually throw the ball and let it go. Was it a similar feeling with the back to where like you were hesitant at first when you started building up, or like what was the process like when you started throwing?
Yeah, it was really weird because I was bedbound for like a month. And so my whole body like atrophied. And so like the thing that I realized the most was like running. Running was really tough. Like my calves, usually you can do like a calf raise like that pretty easily. I couldn't do them. Like one leg, it was just like impossible to do. And so like I just felt heavy, and it wasn't too much of a hurdle to go back and throw, but there was definitely like I didn't like lifting anymore. There was just like I was kind of scared of it. I was just kept remembering like the feeling I got from herniating that disc, and even now like lifting isn't really the same. I don't deadlift anymore. I don't squat anymore. I just do belt squats and types of lunges and stuff like that. But yeah, the back's a really tough one. It's like every single year after that, I had a back issue. So it's not like you get surgery and you're good. It's the back is a constant process for sure.
Yeah, I coached a guy with the Twins that had a back surgery, I think when he was in high school or college, one or the other. And then he ended up hurting it again when he was in pro ball with us and had to have another back surgery. And it just seemed like for him, he just said he always had to constantly be moving around, doing stretches for it, keeping it loose. And he was a relief pitcher. So like in the bullpen, he would just constantly be having to move around to keep it moving. Otherwise, it would just stiffen up. Is that similar with you with throwing, even to this day?
Yeah. So relieving was really tough. Like I would see the other relievers and how they would just be able to sit down for 7 innings and then get their name called and they're ready to go. And I'd be so jealous. I'd be like, Jesus, how can you do that? Like for me, my arm would be fine. I'll throw a couple plyos and then I'm ready. But my back just wasn't ready. It was just like tight. And as you said, like I needed to keep moving, like rolling it out. And so, yeah, as soon as I got converted into a relief pitcher, it got really tough for sure.
Yeah, I actually had a back issue myself the last year I was playing, and it happened at the very beginning of the season. It was like a week before my first start of the season. I was deadlifting. Similar situation, except I actually didn't feel it immediately. Like I think I might have felt something that just felt a little off, but it wasn't really anything bad. And the next day I woke up and like I could feel it really starting to tighten up and kept going along with my normal routine. And then that night when I threw in the first game, it just started to tighten up like crazy the first inning. And it just got worse and worse as the game went on. And then when I woke up the next day, the day after, it was like I literally couldn't even move. And I don't know, I never like got it diagnosed to know exactly what it was. I ended up trying to start again the following week, and I was down like 5 or 6 miles an hour just because I literally could not rotate. Because if I got any extension at all, it just grabbed at like the low right part of my back, and I just couldn't move. So at that point, I went on the IL for a couple of weeks and did PT and whatnot for it. But like I never had an MRI or anything done. And it did linger pretty much the rest of the season. Like if I wasn't stretching it or doing things like constantly, or even taking, just taking Advil or whatever it was, like it would just bother me. And it never really got better the rest of the season. And that ended up being my last season. So I never overcame it again, but I was able to work through it. But man, just having a small dose of what you've gone through with the back, like the back is not fun. Like, you don't realize how important your back is for pitching or for doing any sort of training until you injure it, because it literally is at the center of everything. Like, any sort of rotation, you're going to feel it, and it's going to limit you. And then the issue with injuries in general, when you try to throw through them, is usually you create compensations that lead to other issues. And, I've seen that, with myself and with other players. But, it sounds like for you basically were shut down immediately, right? Like, you didn't try to throw through this and it got worse, correct?
Yeah, there was no chance. Like as soon as I did it, it was I had to have the yeah, I couldn't walk. It was any kind of pressure was just like excruciating pain.
What about any other injuries? Have you had any? You haven't had any surgeries besides the back, right? Like, have you ever had an elbow or a shoulder issue?
Um, so I've never had any surgeries except for my back. I've had a couple on my back, but in 2023 I had an elbow issue, a forearm strain, and this one was kind of an interesting one because I came into spring training with a little bit of soreness. That's what I thought it was. Um, and all throughout spring training, I was fine. It felt good. Actually, I did shut down for like a week in spring training, and then I came back and it felt good. I was ready. And then the very last day of spring training, I felt it just like grab, and it's kind of a scary area because it's like right here, like where like you would think the UCL is. And so I did that, and then I didn't really want to tell anyone because we were breaking the next day, and I wanted to go and break with the team. And so I didn't tell anyone. I was like, oh, I'll just rehab it like what we did in Arizona. I'll be good. And then I go to North Carolina and pitch through it. I was starting every week, and starting helped it so much just because I was on a throwing program where I would start and then take a day fully off, and then the next day only throw plyos, and then the next day I'm doing light catch. And so like I had like pretty much 3 days of recovery. And so starting helps so much. If I was a reliever, I would have been toast. But yeah, I did that for I think 2 months, and then there was one game where it just became kind of like unbearable, and so I had to tell them and be like, hey, like I think I need to go on the IL. But yeah, I think it was just that the back and the forearm, and that's about it.
Yeah, dude, that you made me think of something that I think could be valuable for a lot of kids or even pro guys, really. But like, the fine line of knowing when to say something about an injury is so tough, because you want to play, obviously, and you're afraid that if you say something, even if it's something minor, that they're going to shut you down and you're not going to pitch for weeks on end, when it might just be something simple that needs, you just need a little bit of time and you're going to be fine. But it's, I don't know if ego is the word, but it's really tough sometimes to say that you're injured. Like, I got to experience that a lot as a coach, just knowing players and not being that far removed from playing. Like, I could tell when guys were hurting and when they weren't saying something, and getting a player to build that trust with you to share that something doesn't feel right, even if it's just like a minor thing to where they tell you, hey, I need to be down today. Like, I can pitch tonight if you really need me to, but like, I probably need another day just to recover. Like, even little things like that, if you can build that trust with a coach, that's going to be really valuable. But, at the amateur levels, it's different, because usually, let's just say you're the best pitcher on your high school team. You're the guy that they're going to ride, in every big game. And it's really tough to say something when you're the one that they're relying on. Or if you're in college and, you are the closer and you're expected to throw on Fridays and Sundays and sometimes on Saturdays as well, and you're a little beat up, it's tough to know when to say something and when not to. Do you have any, and I know it's such a gray area, but do you have any advice for guys that are feeling something and, debating whether they should say something to a coach or just keep throwing?
Yeah, I know that's such a fine line for sure. And yeah, I experienced it a couple times. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think as soon as like if you're really hurting and then performance starts to decline, then you should start telling them, because you don't want them to be like, all right, like he's just like sucking right now. you want to tell them, okay, like if you're doing really bad and you're hurting, then you probably want to say something. But I don't know. I think it's just really you just got to kind of know yourself. I think like everyone's gone through um, some type of like soreness, and so if it's similar to that, then you don't have to say anything. But if it's something that you really think that something might be wrong, then you probably want to tell someone. The same with my forearm, like MRIs, everything. It showed that it was like pretty much nothing was wrong. Maybe like a tiny like tear or whatever. But at the time, I was like, look, like something is wrong. Like my elbow hurts so bad, and so I had to tell them. But yeah, I'm interested to see to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, I think like man, I think about it through the coach's lens now, and I think like this is just another reason why it's so valuable to have a radar gun on all of your pitchers, because that can be one of the biggest red flags that a guy is either getting fatigued in an outing, or they're injured, they're getting injured, is if you're seeing a big velocity drop off. So because if you look at like a high school kid, let's just say you're the best kid, you're the best kid in the state of Arizona, for example. I'll use the example Cam Caminetti. He's going to be a first rounder this year out of high school here in Arizona. He throws 94 to 97 from the left side. He could throw 88 to 91, and he's probably still going to dominate. But 88 to 91 compared to his mid 90s is a huge drop off. And that would be a red flag for me as a coach. But if you're not ever radaring your guys, you're not ever tracking these things, it can be tough. And you can let those things slip through the cracks, because if you're the best player on the team, even at your B or C game, you're probably still going to be good enough to perform well. So it can be blinding in a way to just go off of performance at the lower levels when a player is just clearly above everybody else. So like that would be like my number one recommendation as a coach is, kids, especially younger kids, like they're going to want to throw. In most cases, they're not going to say something. So like as a coach, you need to be paying attention and being aware and doing the things that you have control over when it comes to tracking things. Another thing that I've been using recently is the Arm Care app. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it just measures their shoulder range of motion, their grip strength. It measures internal, external rotation. It measures everything with the arm. That can be a really helpful tool just for measuring fatigue. So like for my guys, I have them use it on their high intensity days. So like on a bullpen day or a velo day, we'll do it on those days when they're the freshest. And if their numbers are super low in certain areas, or like their score is well below where we want it to be, then I have that information where I can adjust the plan, because they're clearly not recovered enough for what we're about to do that day. So like using tools like that can be really valuable for guys. So I just think as a coach, it comes down to being objective. So radar gun, tracking things like with an Arm Care app, but also having a relationship with your players where they feel safe that they can say something, and that if they say something, you're not going to blow it off and tell them they still need to play through it, or B, go the other route to where if they say the tiniest thing is bothering them, you shut them down for weeks on end. Like you have to build that trust with a player. And it can be really tough at the lower levels, because players sometimes, high school and even college guys, like knowing the difference between fatigue, soreness, and like an actual injury is a gray area, and it can be tough for a coach to kind of sift through that. But that's where, like, as a player, I feel like it's just really valuable to where if you're feeling a little beat up and a little fatigued, and it really feels like, if you have one day off, you're going to feel much better. Like being able to say that and having that trust with a coach, I think goes a long ways. Have you ever felt like that trust with a coach before, to where like you've been able to tell them, like even this year, right? You're a reliever this year. Has there been any days where you tell the pitching coach like, hey, I need an extra day today?
Yeah. No, I think I've had that trust with a coach. It's just a little bit different in Pro Bowl, just because any little thing that you tell a coach, they're going to record it. And so it was funny. There was one time where the athletic trainer came over to me and he was like, hey man, how's your back? And then I was like, yeah, it feels good. And then we go in, and then we go into the athletic training room, and I see his laptop, and it says my name up there, and it says Josh Gessner, and it says back feels quote unquote good. So they record everything, so it's a little bit different for sure in Pro Bowl, just because they have the luxury of being like, all right, this guy's down, he's a little beat up. Okay, we can give him a day, or like let's just put him on the IL for a little bit. But yeah, for high school, college guys, especially like when it becomes like recruiting time, draft time, it's so hard to be able to take time off. And yeah, it's such a great area. But I think just knowing yourself and being like, if there's really something wrong, then you got to look at it like it just might not be worth it to push through, because that could be a couple, like 1 year versus, a couple weeks off. So
Yeah, for sure. And, in a lot of cases, injuries gradually build up to happening to where maybe you slowly get fatigued and then something happens where you get hurt. But there are other times where it kind of comes out of nowhere. And that was actually the case with me when I blew out my elbow. I actually felt perfectly fine leading up to it. It was during the off season of 2017. So between the 2017, 2018 season, I was training and doing a pretty intensive velo program because I was an independent ball at the time. And, even though I was left-handed, I still did not throw nearly hard enough. That previous season, I touched 91, but I sat like 87 to 89 with not amazing numbers. So it's like, if you're going to throw 87 to 89, touching 91, like your stats have to be off the charts. And so like I knew to take the next step and to have an opportunity in affiliated ball, like I had to do whatever it took, and it had to be maybe more aggressive with my training than I would recommend, a 17 or an 18-year-old to do. And I was doing a pull down. It was a full on run and gun with a 3-ounce ball. And leading up to it felt perfectly fine. And I made a throw and like felt like a pop in my elbow, and like it felt really uncomfortable. It wasn't like a horrible pain, but it definitely did not feel right. And like I got a little bit of a tingle in my fingers. And I was like, that was weird. I'm like, I'm going to make one more throw and just see what this next one feels like. And I was about to make another throw, and like something told me, don't throw this ball. So I stopped it, shut it down for the day. I knew something didn't feel right, but I thought, I'll see how it feels tomorrow and then try to throw again and kind of go from there. And it would feel fine up until I got to about like 85% intensity. Under that, like I could throw all day, felt perfectly fine. But the second I tried to put a little bit of effort into it, it would grab like on the inside of my elbow. So after about 3 to 4 weeks of that, I decided to get an MRI, and it came back and the UCL was torn, and there was like a bunch of bone chips in there as well. So, I thought about whether I wanted the surgery or not. And at the time, I definitely wanted to still play. And in the back of my mind, I was like, even if I'm not going to play again after this, like I want to have an elbow that can function and that I can still train or not train, but I can still, throw and not throw with pain. So I had the surgery and, came back and recovered really well. I didn't play again. I ended up having coaching opportunities that just, there was more doors opening for coaching than playing. It was pretty clear that it was time to move in that direction. So I never came back and played competitively again, but I did still train. I still did a full rehab program, and, threw off the mound and whatnot. I was still able to get back up to 90, which was great after about 14, 15 months post-surgery. And I actually made my own rehab program, because what happened was I was in Arizona when I had the surgery. I had the surgery in March of 2018. And I was doing rehab here for like the first couple months. But after that, I was actually going to Lima, Ohio to be the head coach for a summer collegiate team. So I was going to go out there and I was going to do continue physical therapy there. But I was in a pretty small town and there wasn't a lot of options for like baseball specific trainers. But I did find a PT still, and they helped me with my regular, massage therapy and helping me with my strength exercise and all that. But I got the throwing program from my original surgeon that did it. And I was like, you know what, this program honestly is pretty outdated. Like at that time, people were talking quite a bit how return to throwing programs just weren't very good. There was just a ton of volume. There wasn't intensity considered in the throwing program. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I'm not with an organization. I'm not with a team. Like I can do whatever I want. So I'm like, I'm going to make my own rehab throwing program. And I thought it through, talked to some other people that have had experience with making rehab programs. So I talked to some PTs, I talked to some coaches, and I decided to just formulate my own plan. And when the return to throwing program tells you to start throwing after TJ, it's like 4.5 months, I want to say, post-surgery, you're supposed to throw. Well, when I got to 4.5 months, I didn't feel anywhere near ready to play catch. I was like, I can't even do a pull up without it hurting my elbow. Like, if I can't do a pull up without it hurting my elbow, I probably shouldn't be throwing a baseball. So I'm like, my main focus was I need to get my strength numbers up high enough to where I feel like I am close to being back to where I was pre-surgery from a strength perspective. Because once again, if I'm doing exercises where I'm not even externally rotating my shoulder and I'm feeling tension in my elbow when I flex my forearm, or I'm doing a pull-up, or I'm doing some sort of pulling exercise, then I'm not ready. So I really committed to doing that until I started my throwing program. So it ended up being, what would it have been? It was August, so 6 months after surgery, or 5.5 months after surgery. And I didn't do a baseball throw right away. I actually made a plyo throw for my first throw. So for the first like 4 weeks, I only did plyo balls. I was doing like kneeling throws. So I was on one knee, just doing a constrained like 90-90 drill where I'd counter rotate and then make a throw. Did that. I progressed to standing up to where I did like a staggered stance throw and pivot picks. Then I eventually worked up to doing just like a abbreviated roll-in where I just took like one step forward into a throw and then built up to like a regular delivery throw with a plyo. So this all progressed over about 3 to 4 weeks before I actually moved on to throwing the baseball. And I'll have to pull up the programs. I wrote it down, what I was doing, but I actually think I made weighted baseball throws before I actually threw a baseball as well. Once again, this was super low intensity. Like, I'm not letting it rip. But the idea was that the lighter implements, my arm speed is going to be higher. The peak force is potentially going to be higher on the arm. So I was using heavier implements at the lower intensities until I felt like I was in a place where I could throw the baseball and actually felt like I wasn't going to be pushy. I wasn't going to change my delivery. And something pretty amazing happened. It was like the first time I threw the baseball, it felt pretty darn normal for it being, 6 months post TJ surgery. Most guys, when they have surgery or their first throw after surgery, it looks awful, right? They're like, their elbows down here, they're pushing the ball, they're throwing darts when they're throwing it. And it's just because they haven't built that trust with the arm yet, which makes sense. And the arm's not ready to go at crazy high speeds. But by doing this like 4-week buildup of where I was doing just plows, building up to weighted baseballs of light catch, and then into the baseball, like when I actually started throwing the baseball, it felt really, really good. It felt like I was able to progress quicker after that. So I ended up still being like on the same time scale as a regular return to mound work or to being at full intensity. I just went a different way about doing it. And because I took more time early on to actually make sure I was strong enough and in a good place, I was able to progress a little bit faster. So I'm not by any means suggesting that anyone listening to this does what I did. Like, I'm not a doctor. I use myself essentially as a guinea pig, but it worked for me. And I felt like it put me in a much better position to where I was able to recover faster. I didn't feel like I had to change my mechanics into, I didn't feel like I was putting extra stress on my elbow and having to repattern things at that point. But we can dive into that in a second. But I actually, one positive of surgeries or of just injuries in general is there is extra downtime. So there's time for you to think through what you actually need to improve. And then from a throwing standpoint, like, I was able to slowly build up my delivery into the areas that I thought I needed to improve. Like, so for me, my back leg was really poor. I had a bad loading pattern. I was super pushy. So I was like, you know what, as I'm building back up, I am going to focus on that a lot while I'm at these lower intensities with all these reps, and basically re-pattern myself, reteach myself how to throw as I'm coming back from surgery. Since I don't have to rush back and be ready to go in game action, I can really remap this. What are your thoughts on that? Like, with the back, maybe that's a little bit different. I don't know how slow of a progression it was for throwing, but like, did you have a similar approach to focusing on something mechanical when you were building back up, since you had more time and you're at a lower intensity?
For me, I'm trying to think back, but I'm pretty sure I didn't work on any kind of mechanical stuff at the time because I was in a really good spot. Pre-surgery, I was like throwing the hardest I had ever been, up to 98. And so I was just hoping I think what I was saying was, all right, like, I'm going to take this downtime to really improve, and then I'm going to throw 100 when I come back. But obviously that didn't happen, and my velo just tanked. But yeah, no, that's what Spencer Strider did, right? So he got TJ right after he got drafted, and then he took that time to really build up. I think what he was focusing on was like his mechanics. He wanted to look like Trevor Bauer, and just his lifting. And he just took that valuable time and really developed himself into, who he is today. So yeah, I think one of the good things is that all that downtime you can put into lifting and repatterning and like coming back way better than you were before. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is like to not rush it. It's pretty hard though. Like when I was down, I was like, all right, I need to come back as soon as possible. But I wouldn't say I regret anything because it's just how it played out. But I think if I had put more time into just lifting and just really building back, then I could have made a little bit more progress. But yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, people they want to rush back, especially if it's like in season. Now it's different if it's the off season. It makes it a little bit easier to take your time, or if it's a TJ or surgery where you're out for 6+ months, like kind of have no choice but to go slow. But I'd be curious, for you, we talked about a little bit with the mental side, but like injuries are very much mental when you're coming back from it. Like, I know for me personally, I didn't struggle with it too much. I would say when I first let it go, like 100%, it definitely took a while to like trust that, okay, I can actually step on it and let it go. I could get to like 85, 90% and felt good. But like that extra 10%, it was like there was a little bit of hesitation to truly let it go. And, many players that I've coached that have had injuries, like there's been a similar feeling. And it just takes a while to build back that confidence and to know that you can let it go and that your arm is safe and that you can trust it. Do you think there's been a similar process for you with the back or not really? Do you feel like the throwing kind of just, you picked up where you left off with the throwing?
Throwing wise, yeah, I don't remember it being too difficult. It was yeah, no, it was pretty smooth sailing. I mean, I thought I was throwing hard, but the velo gun wasn't showing that, but it felt fine. Coming back, I didn't have any issues with it, but I definitely have heard stories about like, especially TJ guys. It's just like if you come back throwing and like you're creating bad patterns, as you said, like pushing and like stuff like that, that can really set you back. So another thing is like a lot of people get into their heads when they come back, and so they get a little yipped up and stuff like that. So yeah, it's yeah, I think it's super important to be able to just trust you. But I don't know how you would get around that though. Like, you probably just have to trust it and just have like just know that you put in the time to let it heal, and then you just gotta like just trust it and let it rip.
Yeah, at some point you just have to say, screw it, I'm going to throw it. I'm just going to go for it. I mean, because if you don't, if you live in that timid range for too long, like your performance is going to deteriorate, and then you're going to have more mental struggles of trying to get back to the old version of you. And there's one story I have about Daniel Hudson, who's still pitching for the Dodgers. And I don't know like the crazy details. I don't know what he was going through mentally, but back, shoot, it's probably been 12 years ago now. He was playing for the Diamondbacks. And this is how I knew him well, because growing up in Arizona, I went to Diamondback games all the time. And he was a really good pitcher for the Diamondbacks. He was a starting pitcher, came up as a starter, did really well. Ended up having TJ, rehabbed. During his last rehab outing before he was going to come back to the big leagues, he blew out again and had to have another surgery, like literally, 12 months or whatever it was after the other one. Had another surgery and came back and still made it back to the big leagues. I think they moved him to the bullpen at that point, and he's been a reliever ever since. But he's like mid-30s now. He's like 35 at least, and he's still throwing mid to high 90s. And I'm just like, if there was ever a situation where it'd be tough to come back mentally, to me, it would be in a situation like that, where you're almost at the end of your rehab and then bam, it happens again. And to me, at least, all I'd be thinking about is like, okay, I'm getting through this rehab process again. Is it going to happen again? Or like, at what point is it going to go? And that's just a really tough thing. So like, once again, I don't know the details of his story of like what he dealt with mentally, but from the outside looking in, it looked like it was smooth sailing for him, and that like there was really no extended period of time off other than the standard rehab process, which is just absolutely incredible. And that he's been in the big leagues still for the last, 10 years or whatever it's been since then. So pretty cool. But are you familiar with Daniel Hudson?
No, I'm not. I don't know his story, but it sounds really similar to Cole Reagan's. Reagan's is dominating the MLB right now, and he had two Tommy Johns as well. I think back to back, like similar story where it was like he was just out of rehab and then he blows out again. And so yeah, there definitely have been a ton of guys who have gone through a lot of injuries and came back better than before. So I think that's inspiring. I think all these comeback stories I've been reading have been super inspiring. So yeah, no, that's good.
Do you know Brock Stewart at all from when you were at Tread?
I watched him throw, and I know that he's nasty because he's
Yeah.
throwing like mid 90 cutters and high 90 fastballs. But other than that, I really don't really know his story or anything.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. If you look at his stuff now, it's just like literally every pitch is an above average pitch. And I've gotten to see him up close and gotten to know him a little bit over the years, just with him being in the Twins organization, and he rehabbed with us in single A a couple years ago. So I got to know him a little bit then. But I don't know his exact surgeries that he's had, but I do know that like he was in the big leagues with the Dodgers for a little bit. I think he was like a low 90s guy, like 90 to 92, maybe would touch a 3 or a 4. And I want to say he had shoulder issues. I don't know if it was a shoulder surgery or what it was, but had some sort of arm surgery and had really battled some injuries for a while, and is now throwing, high 90s, just throwing absolute gas, and is, he's 33, maybe 34, and he's throwing, 3, 4 miles an hour harder on average than he did before all of his injuries. And, I know he's done a lot of really good work with Tread, and they've helped him, along the way, but it's just pretty incredible to just see it and to see it in person. Because like I said, I've been able to see some of that process develop, and it's just really incredible. And like you said, it's just inspiring to see these guys overcome things. And I think, regardless whether you're overcoming an injury or anything outside of baseball, like you're always going to there's always going to be some area in your life that you're going to have to overcome an obstacle. And I think hearing stories like this is really cool. And just, you can see people at the lowest of lows in whatever area of their life it is, and seeing them overcome it, whether it took, a year to come back or it took 5 years to come back, like the story still being written if you just keep pushing and keep trying to take it one day at a time and be as good as you can that next day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another part of the rehab process that's really tough is that I know with the Rangers, we're in Surprise, Arizona. And so all the rehabbers stay at the complex. And so every single one of their days becomes so monotonous. They go in 9 a.m., do rehab. They can't throw, they can't lift. They go back, and then they got nothing to do for like the rest of the day, 5, 6 hours. And so I think just having a hobby is so important. When I was going through rehab, I learned how to code. So I was like, all right, I want to learn how to code. And there was like a period of 3 to 6 months where I literally just went in and 2 hours and I was done. And I was done by 11 a.m. And I was like, all right, like, what am I going to do now? And so, yeah, I just immersed myself into coding and doing that. Um, but yeah, I think having a hobby, especially during your rehab process, is so important. Just having something to do, preferably outside of just grinding Call of Duty, which I've done as well. But yeah, finding something like a little bit more productive to do, I think, would really help the mental side as well.
For sure. I want to go back to the coding. So, well, number one, what type of coding do you do, and then what are you using it for? Because I've wanted to learn how to code, but the second I start looking at it, I'm like, okay, I don't have time to to learn this right now, but I'd love to be able to. So, what programming are you using, and what are you using it for?
So at the time, from 2020 to 2023, I was a big trader. So I would trade stocks every single day. I'd wake up, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So Arizona would be like 6:30, and I'd be trading that every single day. And that was something that I just loved doing, and I was pretty good at. And so I don't do it as much right now, but back then it was like trade and then baseball. Like that was my life. So something that I got interested in was algorithmic trading. And so trading is stressful and there's so much emotions involved. And so I was like, maybe I can make the computer do it and I'll code it and then it can do it for me. And so that's kind of what I wanted to get to. And that was like my end goal. And so I learned Python and I went on Udemy, and it was 100 days Python challenge or something like that. And so I did that, and it was a really good course actually. But yeah, I completed that, and after that, like I can pretty much code whatever I want now, especially with ChatGPT. So yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I was just gonna say that actually ChatGPT probably could expedite that learning process now. But that's great. No, it's another story I just thought about actually, because I was thinking about the Rangers. Is Tyler Zombro? He has an incredible story for those that don't know. He was with the Rays in 2021 in AAA and was hit with a line drive in the head. Had a seizure on the mound. I don't know all the details of exactly what happened. So I'm sure you can look up the story online to know exactly what happened. But it was scary. It was really, really, really bad. And he managed to come back. I want to say it was the next season. By the end of the next season, he was pitching in a professional game again. And, he hasn't made it to the major leagues, but like the fact that he came back after that and still played in a game, just like you want to talk about the mental side of overcoming something, of getting hit with a line drive where you almost lost your life, to be able to come back and still play. Like that was truly remarkable, inspiring to me. And, I'm inspired by him constantly when I talk to him and think about that story. But if you haven't heard that one, I definitely would recommend looking it up. I'm sure there's plenty of write-ups on his story, or maybe he's even been on a podcast talking about it, but really cool and inspiring stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he's pretty famous now because of especially in the baseball world, because of trade and everything. But yeah, I was in the clubhouse with him in the Rangers, and I would just annoy him and ask him all these questions. But yeah, no, it's cool. Is he still playing right now? Do you know?
I know he got hurt again this year. So after the after the head injury, came back. He had thoracic outlet syndrome. I do know that. And then something happened again this spring training. So I think he's on the IL right now. I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I know he's still with the Rangers, but I know he's not playing right now. He's on the IL.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, because when I was playing in Hickory, I saw him just chilling in the crowd. So I was like, oh, I don't know what Zombro's doing. He's probably just rehabbing in Charlotte. I know he loves Charlotte, so yeah, that's probably what he's doing. But yeah, no, he has a really cool story for sure.
Yeah. Well, this was good, dude. Injuries, like you said, we could talk about motivational stories all day, and we'll definitely do that in future episodes, diving into players' stories more deeply and talk about all the learning lessons that we've taken from it. But I think, a couple things to wrap up with this episode is injuries. When it comes to talking to your coach, like, man, we can't really give you an answer, but I think building that trust with a coach is important. And then also just knowing, what is the injury? Where is it bothering you? And if your coach isn't tracking it, like if you're able to track your velocity and see like where you're trending, you can buy the Arm Care app. You can use these things to take care of yourself. But at the end of the day, this is your career, and you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself the best that you can. And there's really no right answer, but I think it's important that you look within and that you follow, whatever you think is the right decision for you and your career at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, injuries aren't fun, but if you can take advantage of that downtime, then you can definitely come back better than you've ever been before. And there've been so many guys who've done that. So, yeah, I would just say keep your head up and keep going.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, that's the pod.